Getting right on cue. Welcome. Come on in. We'll give everyone a couple of minutes to join us. Come on in and make yourselves comfortable. Hi, Sarah. Hi, Lindsay. Hi, Dara. Great to see everybody. The chat is open if you want to say hello. Let us know where you're Zooming in from. Great to see everybody. Hey, Marvin. Okay, well, as everyone is joining us, I will go ahead and get us started. Welcome everyone to this AM&P Network session. This is an Associations Council Lunch and Learn. This is New Year's Evolutions, Emerging Trends in Marketing, Content, and more. Today we are welcoming a fantastic panel of association content and marketing experts. I will let everyone introduce themselves in just a moment. I've got a couple of updates and housekeeping slides that I want to just cover with everyone today. So here's a look at what is on tap coming up soon for AM&P Network. The Excel entry period is open now through early March. If you're still deciding what to enter, make a decision. The entry process is really super easy. Also, if you haven't applied to be a judge, I highly recommend doing that. You can do both. You can enter and judge. And really, judging is one of the best ways to see what others are doing within association media, right? It's a great, great way to be inspired. Speaking of being inspired, I also want to encourage all of you to consider applying to speak at Amplify, which is in June this year. The call for speakers is open now through early February. You know, we all have something to share that is of value to our community. And maybe you are nervous about that. What can I offer? Or even like the public speaking part of it. If you haven't done that before, or if you think you can't, you can, and you're among friends. Amplify and the AM&P Network is an incredible place to be able to share your knowledge and share your thoughts with your community like we're doing today. And if you need more of a pep talk, then you can just call me and we will talk through that. We also have next month, we have 2 speed networking events happening on Zoom. They are freelancing speed networking events. So this is a really great opportunity if you work with an association and you hire freelancers, maybe a freelance, copy editor or writer or photographer or designer. This is a really great chance to meet people that maybe you haven't worked with before, add them to your Rolodex, and then you have resources that you can reach out to if you need somebody, even if you need somebody in a pinch or somebody's going out on leave and you need to fill a space. So that's 2 sessions that are happening February 9th and 16th on Zoom, and you can register on our events page. A couple other notes before we jump in. We follow a code of conduct in all of our spaces. We have a strong statement regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. I have links here that I will share in the chat as we get started. We have an antitrust statement for SIIA. It's important that we avoid discussion of sensitive topics like specifics around pricing, things like that. We are a CAE approved provider, and so you can apply this session for 1 credit hour toward your CAE earnings. So this session is set up as a webinar. You can ask questions through the Q&A module. The chat is open as well. The captioning is enabled. So to see it, you can go to show captions and then view full transcript to be able to see that live as well. Randy Ford is here from First Story Strategies to be our moderator today, and he will introduce our incredible panel and get us started. And so with that, I will introduce and invite Randy to join us. Hey, Randy.
Hey, Jen, thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for being here. I see a lot of Chicago people in the chat, which is exciting. That's where I am as well. So wherever you are, thanks for being here. I want to jump right in and let you know about our panel so we can get the conversation going. Cynthia Curry is Creative Director of Planning Magazine at the American Planning Association, also in Chicago. She's been working in editorial design for more than 20 years with both newsstand and association magazines. Since she joined APA in 2018, the magazine and its website have won multiple AM&P Excel Awards. Justine Gaetano is a designer and social media lead at Graphic. She manages social media strategy and especially likes projects that focus on both design and user engagement, which I think she'll talk about. She's also worked in advertising, digital design, and branding. And Jamila Center has been working in marketing and communications for 25 years at MCI. She's the Association Solutions VP of Marketing and Communications. She oversees the entire creative team. Her previous roles include Director of Marketing and Communications at Association Forum and also a large nonprofit. Excuse me. So I've got some questions to kick it off with our panelists, but we also want to know what's on your mind. So if you have questions, drop them in the Q&A box. Of course, you can chat and share your ideas and questions and conversation there as well. So Cynthia, if you don't mind, I want to start with you. So especially when we talk about print magazines, and right now there's a lot of talk about kind of where print magazines are going with, especially with relation to digital. What is it that you all are doing at APA right now in that digital print divide, and what do you see kind of industry-wide? You're on mute. That's all right.
Gosh darn it, and you reminded us all about that, so I'm sorry about that. Thanks for the opportunity to talk with this illustrious panel group that you've put together here. I appreciate that. So, differences between print and digital. What I've kind of observed is so we've got a continued emphasis in content and the strength of content. And I think that what we're really trying to do here at APA is create a difference between that content that you see online and the way that you experience it in the digital or in the magazine. So what I've been talking about with our team is the idea of the experience of leaning in and leaning back. And this is a concept that I actually got from a panel or from a conference session from an earlier AM&P session, Amplify, where Mario Garcia was presenting about his new book. He's from the Poynter Institute and has a lot of experience with newspapers, magazines, and other digital and other media. And the experience, the way that I like to describe it is the lean in experience is your digital experience. When you're looking for something specific, when you're going to mobile for content, you want an answer, you want a solution, you want something immediate, and your content should reflect that. The magazine becomes a more lean back experience. It's when you're allowing the information to come to you and you are putting, you're watching it, you're reading it, you're looking at it in the context, in a curated context. So it's sort of like the difference of going out and getting it or having it there, and you can enjoy it on your own time with a different mindset. So when we do content at APA, we really try to think about this difference and how we present it. So for instance, we might do a longer feature in the magazine, and we would use large photos, and maybe there would be a timeline or a sidebar that goes along with it. So on digital, we use the long feature, but we also might pull it out and do a photo story based on the images. We might also do a how-to story out of the sidebar, pick the 5 tips. The timeline might turn into yet another piece of content. So we're thinking about holistically what something looks like on the page, but not without thinking about how it's also going to look on digital and what those different audiences are interested in. And I found that within the organization, this sort of lean in, lean back thing is a really easy way to kind of share with your other members around the organization what the differences between the two media are and how to create content that works for both.
And it sounds like that is it takes a lot of, well, planning, if you will, for to do that ahead of time. I know sometimes it can be like, we just got to get this print edition to bed and then we can sleep in tomorrow, but and then figure out a way to transfer it to digital. But you're thinking about that up front, it sounds like.
We really are, and perhaps I have an advantage insofar as that, I've been an art director, I'm now creative director, so I'm constantly thinking about, okay, what does this look like? Whether it's on the page or whether it's digital or something like that. So, where are the entry points, all of those kinds of things. So for me and for us, it does take a lot. It does take planning. We can't do it. We don't do it with every story. More and more we're moving digital first. So actually what I'm doing now is I'm obviously thinking about both of them at the same time. And especially original work, trying to do that. We really spend a lot of time on the feature stories, or especially with other projects that are kind of cross departmental, whether it's something with the research department or something with our public affairs people. We've been doing more and more of those, reaching across the different content areas and focuses of the organization to try to pull together things that can be used in a variety of different ways.
And what kind of feedback have you gotten from readers and digital users?
Well, a lot of these, it's been great, to be honest. We have solid people like the magazine, and then which it's hard to kind of quantify the magazine so much, but when we do these things online, we get feedback on our podcasts, we get feedback on the stories that we've done that are also in the magazine. I mean, everything is sort of becoming a lot more cross-functional in terms of whether it's digital or whether it's print. And when we do a longer form story online, of course we refer to the other stories that are related to it that showed up in your print publication, but you're not going to get them unless you can keep going around our website. And ideally that does keep them on the page longer, which we have seen some increases in those kinds of numbers too.
That's awesome. Jamila, let me ask you, you mentioned in your introduction how long you've been working in marketing and communications. So you've seen a lot of changes, a lot of trends, some that stick, some that don't. What trends do you see right now? What's the biggest thing on your mind from a Marcom standpoint?
Yeah, I think from a Marcom standpoint, I'd have to point to AI right now, and what that enables. Excuse me. Particularly, within the small to mid-sized business space, the association space, those spaces that, historically maybe have not been the earliest adopters of new tech. And I think historically a lot of new technology, was introduced at a fairly high price point, and required a fair amount of support for IT to build it and put it into your system, and just to allow it to be used. And now, with the internet, with open platforms, things like Open AI, Chat GPT, all of these kinds of things for both generating content and for also generating graphics and visuals to support that. I think it just really changes the game, and at least for the short time, in some ways begins to level the playing field from what a very small organization is able to produce and publish compared to Fortune 500 companies, organizations, and leading nonprofits and associations throughout the world. So I think that that's really one key component. But I also think a little bit more, the conversation is everywhere when it comes to DEI and insert your additional, final letter, belonging, respect, accessibility, whatever it may be. But I think that AI also will afford us attainable opportunities to become more accessible, and reach a broader audience, much with with a less heavy and significant lift to format things and to do things in a different way. I think it's actually both it's kind of a twofold scenario where the AI tools that are out there enable those with varying abilities to access content in different ways. And also, as content publishers, it enables our ability to make that content more accessible in the first place. So I think it's a bit of a both and there.
So for our participants who are maybe at one of those smaller organizations and or are looking for ways to be more accessible, what would you recommend they start doing right away in terms of taking advantage of AI?
Start Googling. I'm not even kidding.
Yeah.
Because the search results that you'll receive are like free, free accessibility tools, or try it for free and things like that, and really just start Googling. You can get specific in your searches as related to what exactly it is that you're trying to accomplish, and really just start researching. There are so many tools out there that help you, even with you know language, and ensuring that the way that you are structuring your written articles and things like that is as accessible as possible. And like I use Grammarly, right? It certainly is checking grammar, but it's also kind of making sure it's checking for readability, not just correct grammar or incorrect grammar, but readability and how you're organizing your words. So, I'm looking here at some of the comments in the chat about how AI can make your content more accessible. So I was a little bit responding to that as well.
Yeah.
I think there was just one other thing that I wanted to add right now related to what Cynthia was discussing. And it just popped into my head as she was talking. And I started really thinking about maybe, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, I was working with a printer. He came into the office at Association Forum and he showed me like some kind of postcard where he was utilizing augmented reality, right? And so you're taking this postcard, it's flat, and then you can scan it with your phone, and it's like displaying some kind of cool augmented reality visual. And I think that the tools to create that kind of digital component on a print publication are also becoming much more accessible, to download an app to be able to do those kinds of things, as opposed to having to go to someone with some specialized platforms and software.
Yeah, I do. You mentioned, you kind of referenced Kelsey's question from the chat, and I want to get to one of her points. It sounds like, I think for a lot of people, it's figuring out how to use those AI tools to kind of augment what is already happening instead of replacing those of us who are writers or the people who are visual creators. So how do people walk that line to make sure they're
there still has to be some thinking. It has to start with a human thought process, a human strategy, right? What are the goals that you have? What is it that you're trying to achieve? Some understanding of your audience and things of that nature. So I would say, that the AI is helping you probably maybe 80%. But even with that, you have to make sure that you are validating what is being produced, right? Is this accurate? Is this truthful? Is it flawed? And then I think, I don't really think it's going to, devalue the writing profession. I just think it might be a catalyst for changing what that means.
Yeah.
Anytime there's new technology that does work that used to be, or had historically been human centric, human generated work, that question comes up. But, we're humans, we persevere. And so I think we use our skills in different ways over time. I don't know what that's going to be at this point, but I think it will just happen. I don't think that all of a sudden or over the course of a decade, writers are going to go away.
Yeah.
I just think it might, evolve and look different.
I think Grammarly that you mentioned is a great example of that, because I don't feel as a writer or editor threatened by Grammarly. I recommend it to people
Right.
as a tool that they can do on top of working with people. And Jen pointed out that there was a Slack conversation this week about AI generated transcripts, for example, which I use to help with my writing. So Justina, I want to ask you, so let's talk social media for a second, another place where there's fast moving trends. What do you see right now is the biggest thing within social media?
Sure. So sort of going into exactly what Jamila was saying, people, I think, are craving right now that human touch when it comes to content. So it's almost like taking a step back from what's trending necessarily and taking a look at, okay, who are we? What's our social strategy for the year? What are the pillars that we're sort of founded on? And making sure there's that authenticity communicated through every piece of content you're putting out there. And that doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be hyper refined and pristine. I think we're going to start seeing this support for very genuine content, even if it's more of like a casual vlog style or just any sort of like casual captures essentially. So think of, maybe you have a work event and you want to be highlighting culture on your social media platforms. Take a snapshot of you and your team hanging out, having fun, collaborating. And I think that helps to kind of tell the story of who you are and bring that sense of authenticity as well.
Are there specific accounts that you think we should check out across the various mediums that are kind of influencers you look to, whether it's related to associations or just people who are in your mind doing social right this week?
That's a good question. I think the important thing to realize is that a lot of younger generations especially are going to social media almost as like search engines. So rather than going to Google, they're going to LinkedIn or TikTok to find out more about a company. So I think it's not necessarily like certain businesses or organizations that are doing it super well, but it's more about the ones that are really telling that story clearly. An account I follow is called Arcade, and they specialize in creating social media content. So that's more about understanding what are the upcoming trends, how to partake in them, and you can see how they apply it to their own group, and then of course the clients they work with. So I think they do a really great job of highlighting their own social media, but also a bit of their clients' work as well.
That's great. I want everybody to let us know what questions you have for the panel, but also continue the conversation, the great chat that's going on in the chat box about the trends that you're seeing and are working on. We would love to hear your ideas too when it comes to any of the types of content that we're talking about or beyond. You can also drop questions in the Q&A box. I want to go around and get everybody's thought on another thing that we've touched on a little bit. So everybody's dealing with that struggle of doing more with less, and I don't think that's going to go away. And one of the big things, which has also come up in the chat, is repurposing all kinds of content. So I'm curious what tips you have that associations or organizations can start doing tomorrow to repurpose content more smartly. Let's start with Justine.
Surely. So I think a super helpful tool is making sure that you have a brand that can be templatized, whether that's a brand campaign or just the branding of your association. What you can do is kind of take the qualities and assets of it, build out a palette, fonts, a photo library. You can kind of consider the different aspects of what would be helpful, and then scale it for a square. And that can be used for Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. You can scale it specifically for each of those different platforms for a reel. So I think it's just making sure that there's scalability. And then that way you're really doing a lot with essentially just a style guide or a brand guidelines, and making sure that you have those flexible templates will allow you to stretch that across everything.
And to do it kind of upfront, again, instead of coming at the end and being like, oh, we need to get this in our other channels and it's not the right format for it. Jamila, what about you? What can people be doing now to get most out of their content?
Well, I think as we continue to increase the video content that we produce, it's going to be easier and easier to repurpose that content. So I remember years ago, we do a webinar and it would be an hour and we would think that that was great. And we can then, write an article or do all these things from that content. And absolutely, that's all true. However, we would then have to go back through and watch the whole webinar and seriously be taking notes on all of the key points and how we're going to reinforce this and that. And now with things like captioning and transcripts and stuff like that, it makes that process, in my opinion, a lot easier, right? Because instead of going through the whole hour webinar, I can much more quickly scan through the text in this transcript and extract those key points and then do, my infographic or whatever kind of thing, create an outline maybe for a podcast discussion to follow along. I just think that we can do it more quickly. And I also think, when it comes to repurposing content, I think we have to remind ourselves as the ones doing it that our audience isn't necessarily remembering that 3 months ago we talked about this thing. And they might not have even seen it, right? Everybody doesn't see all of the content from anywhere. If you do, you got some other issues. So, I think we need to not be as leery about reusing content, especially that proved to be effective and worked well. We get a lot more worn out internally, so to speak, of content than our external audiences do, I believe.
I think educational programming, including webinars, are a great place to do that because you can use it throughout, for months. You could sometimes just take the audio itself and make a podcast. It doesn't have to be a separate discussion. I think there's a lot of opportunity there that sometimes we don't think about. Cynthia, you've already talked a little bit about this in terms of repurposing content and how you all kind of repurpose it, even, if you will. But what is something kind of bite-sized that people could start doing to make the most of their content?
I would second the idea of using video content and transcripts and educational webinars and going through those transcripts and creating additional content. We recently took a video that was at one of our conferences. The conversation was with a book author. We turned that video, which was only present for those people at the conference, and then created a podcast out of it. We then took the podcast transcript and created a Q&A out of that. So now we've got, there were three different pieces of content. We were able to make two pieces of content that we were able to use in the magazine and on our podcast out of that one. And I would also really encourage people to talk to other people in your departments, break down as many silos as you can, because other departments often have created content and you can kind of piggyback on it. whether it's education and what are the most popular webinars, do Q&As or how-tos out of those, and then promote them so that the education department gets the dollars, whereas our content's just sort of out there to kind of helping people. Yeah, and again, like I said, go into other departments. We've been working with research on the trend report that APA puts out. And this is like, this year it's an 80-page document with tons and tons of trends. And we've kind of really used that not only as jumping off for story ideas, but also taking sections out of it and reusing it as stories in the magazine and reusing it as stories in the online. So really just kind of taking a look at what's around in the organization can sometimes just be a very simple thing.
Yeah, I love the idea of kind of breaking down those silos. There may be things that membership or sponsorship people are putting out that has language in it that could be helpful elsewhere. And sometimes we miss out on that by just not being in those same meetings or the same Slack channels. One of the things that's been pretty big right now for Associations Council, but also elsewhere in association world is DEI and accessibility. And we've talked about it a little bit, but I want to go a little more in depth on that and see what trends you're seeing and what you want to see. And Jamila, I'll start with you.
Great. I think, one of the things that I'm saying, I hope it's not a trend. I hope it's just kind of the way things shake out to be. I feel like the movement, so to speak, is becoming more authentic and is becoming less of something that, organizations have added to their vision and values statements and things like that, and more actively embedding DEI and so on into their actual practices. So from things like putting, whatever kind of accessibility tools on their websites to creating spaces for employees to have kind of their internal resource groups to collaborate and talk about certain equity opportunities, and then actually form strategies, suggestions, and bring that back to the organization. In a case like MCI, we do have our ERGs, employee resource groups, covering a bunch of topics. And as we have discussions, if we think that this is something that MCI should be doing either as an organization or sharing and educating our clients to do for their members, I feel like there's a lot more momentum on those activities that are actually making a difference, as opposed to writing and saying, this is our position and this is our statement. I think we're finally getting to the point of getting those diverse perspectives and stakeholders activated, and not just something that organizations are talking about or mentioning doing.
Yeah, I think you're right that in the summer of 2020, there was a lot of stuff on paper about what was going to happen, but I think it's taken a while for people to understand how to actually make those changes and have those conversations as opposed to just talking about it. So Cynthia, what are your thoughts on this world?
Well, there's a lot of thinking and re-examining going on in the planning community right now about these issues, about social justice and inclusion and things like that. So, from the content that we're producing, I mean, we've been trying for years to make sure that we are inclusive in the content, in terms of both visually, obviously reflecting our different communities, looking for writers and other illustrators and photographers of all different backgrounds to participate in the contributions to the magazine. on another layer, all of our online publications are created so that they are accessible for people. And I think that those are the kinds of things. Accessibility for online publications can sort of sometimes be a challenge because there's so much you have to kind of do in the background, but it's, we've as an organization decided it's really something that's important that we really want to put an emphasis on in that way.
Justine.
I feel similarly, of course, DEI should never feel like a trend, but at the same time, if we are going to talk about how to stay involved with DEI in the new year in your communications, I'd say visually what I'm seeing is sort of the shift, and it's not bad, but I think normally if we want to do a lot of illustrations that felt very inclusive of people, sometimes we would just make everyone blue or make everyone purple or pink or these fictional colors, just so, it can be anyone. And there's something beautiful in that anyone can kind of see themselves in illustrated figures. And I think now we're starting to see this celebration of true and authentic skin tones. So that's kind of one small visual shift, but it's important even with photography. I think there's a lot of, oh, well, the whole branding here is blue, so let's make it a blue photo. But now it's like, okay, let's keep the branding blue, but keep the photo in full color. So again, just really celebrating that. And then from a social media perspective, I'd say there's two key things there, and that's really representation and consultation. So we want to make sure that people feel represented, but also that they're represented in the right way, that it's not someone else choosing their voice or how their community is being presented. And I think this is tricky sometimes because it's like, okay, so how do we consult with someone? Maybe we don't have a full-time DEI consultant on our staff, but, would it be appropriate to reach out to a close friend who's clearly passionate about this kind of stuff? Sure. Would it be appropriate to reach out to like a faraway past college acquaintance who you haven't talked to in years? Probably not, so I think it's just kind of understanding what are the resources you have to make sure that you're really uplifting the community that you're presenting in visuals or any sort of communications, really.
That's a great point. Does anyone have any other thoughts on that topic? Bridget had a great point going back to Cynthia's point on the working kind of across departments, and said that they now have a broader cross-departmental content strategy with a consultant, and more immediately, they started a weekly content sharing meeting that includes comms and content reps from across their departments, and that it's worked well for repurposing. Plus, it's a fun meeting, she said. So I would love to see, feel free if you have any questions to drop them in the Q&A box or the chat. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep going through my questions. So I want to think about, if we were having this conversation a year from now, what is something that you want to be seeing that maybe people are doing differently, and maybe something that we can start right away to make that change between now and if we were having this conversation again next year. Let's start with Cynthia.
Oh gosh. Okay. So I guess what I think that we touched on this a little bit about the ability to sort of raise our game a little bit, and to using AI to help us really create the best and improve our content and improve the way that we meet our clients' needs as much as possible. I think that if we continue to focus on content excellence and what our and what within the organization our members want, but of the AM&P organization, but also, obviously the places that we work. And I think that sort of is the kind of a thing that I think that is, I would like to say that a year from now, I was able to do some research and collect data from a variety of different sources and really feel like I understand my audience a little bit more and am able to meet what their pain points or what they're interested in with our content.
It sounds like you all do. I mean, you were talking about this 80-page report. It sounds like this is it's already a very reflective organization bringing in that input, right? Which I think doesn't happen necessarily at every organization. So why do you all find that so important?
Well, we find it important because that's part of our, that trend report is part of our, what we call foresight practice. And it's a matter of planning with the future. So it's not, and this particular report is ways that a world, trends that are around us are affecting the planning profession. And so how we can incorporate this, the trends that are happening within the world into planning. So that particular content has been broken down into like trends that you can act on now, trends that you need to watch, prepare for, and ones that you need to watch and learn about. It's really a fun project, and it's going to go live. I've been embedded in it for the last month, but it's going to go live on the 25th. So pitch for the APA trend report. But we think it's really important because it's a way to help our members really prepare, to know what's going on, and to get a sense of how they can use information that we are giving them to be better planners, to be prepared, so that they aren't blindsided by something like, oh my gosh, I've never heard of this before. They can use this information to really be prepared. And it's the research and stuff has been really well received by members. And we do think it is kind of unique in the association space. And it's one of the most it is the most downloaded publication and product that we have at the organization.
That's great. Jamila, what do you think is something that we as an association community can start doing right away, and the impact that'll have about it, down the road?
That is a great question. I think, the more that we step outside of our comfort zones and just try and experiment and test. And these don't have to be massive experiments, right? I'm all for picking one thing, one small thing, and just experimenting with trying something new. I think, some associations, have a little bit of a tendency to be a little bit more conservative, to not want to kind of rock the boat too much. And I'm not saying, go out to deep sea in the middle of a, hurricane, but, maybe, teeter totter just a little bit in your canoe, get a few splashes on you and see what happens. I think we really, now have increasing access to affordable tools that we can really try to step our game up in incremental ways. And so I'm hoping that in a year from now, we've really kind of embraced some of the tools and technologies and are running fast and are seeing lists of, the leading campaigns maybe coming more from within our space, because the playing field is getting more and more level, I think.
Mm-hmm. I think, yeah, we can all think about those people and those organizations and individuals who this is the way it's always been done, and who are a little more skeptical about trying new things, but everything's changing around us. So
it's changing, and it's changing very fast, right?
Yeah,
very, very, very fast.
And it's not going to slow down. I don't think.
I think it's only going to go faster, right?
Yep.
So I think we gotta kind of get outside of ourselves, not, really think about our 19-layer approval processes of every committee and the executive committee and that committee, and just find some grace to do small experiments.
Yeah, that's great. Justine, going back to your point about authenticity, there's a lot in the chat about sourcing actual member photos for an organization and trying to get away from stock imagery as much as possible, and as well for podcasts. But in the broader picture, what do you think are the things that we can start doing now to have an impact down the road?
Yeah, likewise, I think social media especially is a fast moving monster. I've heard it described as a wicked problem versus a complex problem. And this is new information to me, but essentially what that means is a complex problem is something like a game of chess. You know, the parameters are clear, how you move within them and win or succeed, that's the strategy. A wicked problem is something closer to raising a kid who's 2 versus 3 versus 4 versus 5. You know, it's always shifting and changing, and you need to adapt to the needs of that problem. And not to say a child is a problem, but you understand. So I would encourage people to allow their strategy, especially with social media, to be flexible. You know, it's more important now than ever that social media is used for brand awareness and discovery. So I think just keeping that in mind as your strategy is shifting is going to bring you to a greater point of success. You know, it's the first thing a lot of people are seeing when they search your name. So just making sure that it's really coming off authentically for who you are, what you do, what you're excited about. And I think lastly, I would just say that, you know, don't be afraid to be a little more casual and have fun, right? Social media doesn't need to be so restrictive. Even LinkedIn, people are really starting to become, just a little more colloquial with their messaging. And I think it's important to recognize that. And especially with the rise of video, there's this sense of sometimes if something is too casual, it's not professional, but sometimes those are the ones that resonate stronger because it feels like, you know, it's something that's handcrafted from a member of your community or whatever it might be. And it feels inviting. And that's exactly what your brand should feel like.
Yeah, talk about LinkedIn a little bit more, because I think that's something that people still sometimes struggle to understand, and how to use it beyond just their own personal use, but how to use it for an organization. Do you have any tips on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say I saw something the other day that basically was like, oh, it's so refreshing coming back to LinkedIn, you know, just because things feel so overly curated on everything else. And here you can really see the talent of photographers, designers, creators. And when it comes to associations, I think even promoting today's session, there were lots of tools for all of us to tap into, whether that's through videos and adding those branded elements to the videos, but resharing on, so I'm a part of the graphic team. So, you know, graphic reshared the post. I know we were communicating and liking with each other. So I think it's kind of having that team mindset of, okay, you know, maybe it's not like perfect lighting and a perfect camera shot, but the fact is we're in it together. We're all kind of bringing our own unique perspectives and our own unique voices too, which is we're celebrating.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that is the authenticity. I definitely have enjoyed LinkedIn more, especially compared to the early days when I was afraid that even just opening it was going to blast an email to everybody I've ever talked to, because that is how it seemed to work at the time. But I do think I see a lot more authenticity there. So I think I agree, and I'm glad to hear you say that as well. If you have any questions, we're gonna now would be a great time to drop them in. But I do just want to go around and get everybody's just kind of a closing thought of something that that you want people to leave with here today, and or make a note to start incorporating into their work. And we'll start with you, Jamila.
Shoot.
Sorry.
Because I had something that I was just thinking about that I wanted to add, but then I started typing and reading the chat, and so I forgot to.
Say that again. Your audio cut out there for a second.
Yeah. So I had something in mind that I wanted to kind of like close with, but then I started chatting in the chat, and so it kind of like slipped out for just a second. So can we just come back in just a second?
Yeah, we'll come back to you. Yeah, sure. Cynthia, then you're up if that's all right.
Oh gosh, okay. I guess I would just encourage people, you know, when you're talking about the different pieces of content, to try, even like, you know, like Jamil was saying, to try it on one story and see if you can sort of just stretch that out, and how you can get the 2 for or the 3 for out of it. Because I think that, like all of us are in that boat where, we have to, like, as you say, do more with less. And the more that we can be smart about where we're spending our time and where we are spending our energies and finding ways to, not have to do things over and over again, and take advantage of other people who have already done them. I just think that that's really a really good way for organizations to go at this point. And I know we're going to be doing a lot more of that and creating a whole digital strategy about ways that we can take all of those kinds of things and create our content and, make it work from digital and make it work for print. And so we're kind of in the throes of that right now. So it's going to be an interesting year for us for that.
Yeah. Justine.
I'd say the key kind of takeaway, of course, as mentioned, authenticity, but another point of that is uplifting content. A lot of times, especially when it comes to news sources, it can feel very doom scrolling. So if you are present on social media and not a news source, that might be a form of escapism for people. That might be a sense of catharsis. So I think just keep in mind to try and keep the content positive and uplifting, even if it is something serious that needs to be spoken about. Taking that hopeful spin is going to go a long way. Providing resources of how people can get involved or take action is also really good. Creating shareable content so people feel like they're part of a larger conversation and not just isolated between them and their phone screen. And especially, we're coming off of this post-pandemic, pre-recession. People want some positivity this year, especially American people. So if that's our audience, just keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's great. Great reminder. And Jamila, did you think of it?
No, I didn't, but it's okay. Anybody can get in touch with me. I'm sure I'll remember at some point. But what I did, think about that really kind of struck me was, Justine was talking about, and I think it was mentioned some in the chat too, about, people wanting to hear from people. And so I want to say from, kind of a content and marketing perspective, and I look at all of us here today, let's not forget about leveraging our networks that might be a little bit different to help us. I know that, for example, I am on a couple of different volunteer committees for both ASAE and AM&P, and I'm reaching out to someone from my past to kind of be a source for an interview that I need to do a write-up. And but she's all for it. And so just don't forget about the power of your network, people that people that you might have past experiences with, to contribute content that it doesn't always have to be directly from within your industry or your sector, right? It's oftentimes about the viewpoint and the position or the approach. And it can be applicable to many different things. And I think sometimes, I know I'm guilty of this, I focus very narrowly on who exactly fits this criteria. And I don't remind myself, often enough that I know all of these people, and many people actually could speak to this, even if they're not directly in this specific circle. So, utilize your network is what I would say from a content perspective.
That's a great perspective.
It can help
It goes
and they
along with,
want to, right?
yeah, exactly. Everybody wants that, and it goes along with what Cynthia was saying, I think, about, not getting stuck just with the people we work with every day.
Yes.
Departmentally, it's kind of a bigger picture version of that. Well, Jamila, Cynthia, Justine, thank you all so much. And thanks to Jen and AM&P for bringing us together today, and everybody for the great ideas and suggestions in the chat as well. I know I took a lot of stuff away that I'm going to take some notes on now that while it's still fresh in my mind. So thank you, everybody, and I hope everybody has a great afternoon.
Thanks a lot,
Thanks,
everyone.
Randy. And
This is
thanks
so
for everyone.
fun.